This is Gemara in Kiddushin, Daf Ayin Hey, and all the learning has been generously sponsored as an incredible schos refuah shlema for Vacheva Basirul Bracha B'Siyat Dishmaya, the incredible Koyach HaTaira. Every word of Taira, every daf of Gemara, Talmud Taira Kenegei Kulam should bring Vacheva Basirul Bracha a complete refuah shlema, as well as the learning should be a schos hagana, schos protection for Aryeh Menachem Moshe Ben Dina Taiva. Psiyat Shmaya, an incredible siyum being planned for Sunday evening. TheSiyum.org at Bellworks. Mirza Hashem. Hope to see as many people as possible, and at some level to celebrate Psiyat Shmaya, Nashim. I'm sure many of us, when we started this journey about 3.5 years ago, didn't fathom, never dreamed of where we've gone today. Baruch Hashem. But as the saying goes, every day it's another daf. So let's get to today's daf, which is Ayin Hey Amid Beis. We pick it up on Ayin Daled Amid Beis, 3 lines from the bottom, and just one word of technology. Few people were mentioning that the page wasn't clear, the page of Gemara, that is. Yes, we've been having issues with the visual of myself, but those who are trying to look on the Gemara page, so it really depends on the platform you are listening to. Of course, we always encourage everyone to stick to Torah anytime, but the quality on YouTube and on the Spotify podcast, which actually has video nowadays, has the full 1080p quality, HD. So if you're looking for higher quality and you are on those forms of technology, we could be found there as well. ccdaf.org, all the information is there. But for now, let's get going. Tanu Rabbanan. Says the Gemara, continuing the discussion of Yochsin. Ben Teisha Shanim V'Yom Echad. We have a boy who is 9 years old. Ger Amayni Ma'avi Mitzri V'Adoimi Kuti Nitzin Chalal U'Mamzer. And this boy is any of the aforementioned sex of people. He's a ger, he's an Amayni Ma'avi, etc., etc. And what happens? Sheba'u, and he is together with a Al HaKoyanes V'Alaviyav Albas Yisrael. So we have, this is really the quintessential din that we've been speaking about since we began the parak. We have a boy who is puzzle, a boy with a yichos flaw. He is together with a regular Jew, Kohanes Leviah Bas Yisrael. The halacha is pasluha. He makes her puzzle. He's puzzle, he imparts, and we can use the word of infection basically, he imparts to her. Rav Yosi Aimer, no. Kol shezarai puzzle, paisel. Kol she'ein zarai paisel, einai paisel. Says Rav Yosi, no. If the zara is puzzle, then it's true. Then she becomes puzzle. But if the zara is not puzzle, then she does not become basal. Rashi over here gives an example. If you look at the last line of Rashi, Kol shezare pasal min akuna, paisal es ishte min akuna. We'll come on and farish maybe now. We'll deal with the particulars in a few moments. Rashba Goimer says, Rav Shimon Gamliel, as we turn over to Ayin Hey, Amid Aleph, Kol she'ata noisei bitoi, ata noisei al munasai. We're discussing a kain, as the top Rashi points out. Anyone that their daughter you are allowed to marry, then you are to marry that person's widow. Kol she'ata noisei bitoi, ata noisei al munasai. So says the Gemara, we have 3 shitas over here. Let's understand this machlekes a little bit deeper. Says the Gemara, ma'ika. What is the difference? Let's get practical. Bein Tanakama or Rav Yosi, the first 2 shitas. Amar Rav Yochanan Mitzri Sheni Ika Beinayu Ushneim Lo Lamdua Ela Mikayin Gadol Be'almana. Both of them learn it out from the same source, but they have different applications. Tanakama and Rav Yosi, as the Gemara now explains. The Tanakama Savar Ki Koyin Gadol Ba'almana, that it's equatable. Again, this 9-year-old boy that's possible being together with a Kohanes Leviah Yisraelis is equatable in din that she will become puzzle to a Kohen Gadol Be'almana. In what form? Ma Kohen Gadol Be'almana, we're 8 lines down, the first one line is Gadol, and Ayin Heyam and Aleph. Just like a Kohen Gadol Be'almana. Shebi Yasai Be'aveira. They weren't allowed to be together. Upaisel Ba, and she, the wife, becomes basal. Av Kol Shebi Yasai Be'aveira Paisel. Says the Tanakama, from there we learn out, anyone who the act of Tashmish was Ba'avira, Paisel, pasels them. Rav Yosi Savar, no. King Gadol Ba'almana. A different way of equating to Kohen Gadol Ba'almana. Ma Kohen Gadol Ba'almana, Shezaroi Pasel, Upaisel. Just like a Kohen Gadol Ba'almana, that the Zaroi, that the child of such a union, says Rav Yosi, is Pasel, and therefore it makes her Pasel. Av Kol Shezaroi Paisel, Pasel. Lafuke, this case. Mitzri Sheni Shein Zare Pasal, Mitzri Shlishis is not Pasal, therefore, Lafuki Mitzri Sheni Shein Zare Pasal does not become Pasal. Where do we know this from? The Amar Kra, Banim Asher Yuladu Lahem, Dar Shlishi Yavalekem, Bekal Hashem, that the Dar Shlishi could come into Klal Yisrael, and that's why a Dar Sheni, a Mitzri Sheni, will not, the child will not be Pasal. That's the difference between Tanakama and Rav Yosi. Comes along Rashi Ba'agoymer. Kol Shatanoise Bita Tanoise Almunas of Cheshiatanoise as Bitoi. Yatanoise Almunasai. Ask the Gemara, Ma'igam in Rav Yosi, the Rashbag. What's the difference between the second and third opinion? Amar Ula Geramoni Mavi Kabinayu Ushneim Leilamuda Mikon Gadol Ba'almana. Again, the same source. So far today has been Kohen Gadol Ba'almana. We've had already 2 ways of learning Kohen Gadol Ba'almana, Tanakam and Rav Yosi. Now we have another 2 ways of learning Kohen Gadol Ba'almana, Rav Yosi Rashbag. The Rav Yosi Savar explains the Gemara Kohen Gadol Ba'almana. We equate it to a Kohen Gadol Ba'almana 20 lines down. First one line is Savar. Ma Kohen Gadol Ba'almana. Just like going Gadol without Mana, Shezar Oi Pasal Upaisal, I've called Shezar Oi Pasal Upaisal. But comes along Rashi Bag and he says, no, Ki Kohen Gadol Ba'almana. Ma Kohen Gadol Ba'almana, Koshekol Zaroi Pasal. I've called Shekol Zaroi Pasal. Has to be someone that all of the Zaroi, all of the offsprings will be Pasal. Afilu Nekevais, even the girls. And therefore, according to Rashbag, what does this come to exclude? Lafuki geramayni umayavi, dinekevais havek sherais lavai bekal, the very famous drasha from David HaMelech, Ros HaMoyaviyah, Ta'amar mar amayni v'loi amaynis, moyavi v'loi moyavis. And that really concludes part A of today's shiur, which is the 3 shitais in a puzzle with a Kohen Levi and Yisraelis, Tanakama, Rav Yosi, and Rashbag. Continues the Gemara. Now let's get a case that everyone agrees. Amar Rav Chisda says, Rav Chisda kol maidim, everyone agrees. Ba'almanas Isa, Shebsula Likuna. Everyone agrees in a case of an Almana Isa, which means an Almana that we're not sure, an Almana which is a Safek, Shepsula Likuhuna. How do we know that? Explains the Gemara. Man Mekel Bani Tanai, who is the most Mekel of the 3 shitas that we just had? Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, V'komar, and says Rashbak on the first medium-sized line, Kol Shatanai Sebita Tanai Se Almunah Savchia Tanai Sebita. What does that exclude? Lemute almanas isa shepsulikuna lafu came in the hani tanai, which comes to exclude from the following tanaim. Now this lafuki is going back on Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda that said that everyone agrees in the case of the Safek almana. Almana that we're not sure of, that the din is Psuli Kahuna. So that we're learning from Rashbag, who's the most makel. And that, says the Gemara, is not like the following Tanya. Ditnan, we learned in the Mishnah, hey, Rav Yeshua, Rav Yehuda ben Beseira Amanas, Isak Shekish Sheira Likuna. So clearly Rav Chisda is disagreeing. My taima, Havi Svek Sveika Le Kula. Rav Chisda is saying that it's going to be Machmir. Is this agreeing? We continue with the two dots, 5 lines into the medium-sized lines of Ayin Heam and Beis. Vadayin bivadayin mut. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Says Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, halacha, what's the halacha? Krav Eliezer. Came into Kam Shmuel Amar Li. Hillel Shoyne Asara Yuchsin Alu Mebavel. When they told this halacha to Shmuel, what did Shmuel respond? He said that Hillel learned the 10 Yuchsin that came up from Bavel. V'kula matar lava zeh. V'at Amrit, and you say halacha Krav Eliezer, and you say that the halacha is like Krav Eliezer, who says those are mesupik, are not let to marry to each other. So says the Gemara, that differs with that which is being quoted b'shem Shmuel. Says the Gemara, v'rami derav aderav, v'rami deshmuel adeshmuel. Let's make this an isolated machlaikas. Let's understand how we have a stira between Rav and Shmuel themselves. Deitmar arusa she'ibra. We have an arusa. Unfortunately, well, not unfortunately that she's an arusa, but unfortunately that she becomes pregnant. Of course, an arusa being a woman that only underwent erusin, the first stage of marriage, which of course at that point she is forbidden to be together with her husband. But she'ibra, she becomes pregnant. Rav Amar Havlad Mamzer, Shmuel Amar Havlad Shtuki. So a fundamental machlok as Rav and Levi as to the status of the child of this arusa. Is it a mamzer or a shtuki? Explains the Gemara. Rav Amar Havlad Mamzer Umuter b'mamzeres. Ushmuel Amar Havlad Shtuki v'asr b'mamzeres. So says the Gemara, that's a direct steer to the Rav and Shmuel that we just quoted. Answers the Gemara, Eipach, switch it around. Rav Amar Havlad Shtuki, Shulam Havlad Mamzer. Says the Gemara, Tarti Lamali. Okay, now you made it, that's not machlek as Rav and Shmuel. But what's the reason that we need the same din 2 times? Explains the Gemara, Sricha. Dietmar Baha. If we would have only said Baha, in the case that Rav says, Allah is like Rav Eliezer, who says that a shtuki is also to marry mamzeres, I would have thought Baha come around Misham the Rav Ksheir Metzla Mosar Kasher. Aval Hasam the Rav Sul Metzla Imadil Shmuel. Maybe over there he's Madil Shmuel. And furthermore, V'yitmar Bahach, in the second case of Shmuel Bahach come Rav, that's what Rav says is din. For what reason? Excuse me. Misham the Ika Limitli, because you could explain that the case is Ba'aros. Aval Bahai, Madil Shmuel, Sricha, that's the reason why we need both dinim to mention this case 2 times. Says the Gemara, Viba Yisema Sekim Shah, Loilam Tei Lo Tepach. Really, don't sit around Rav Shmuel. Oh, my mom said to come Rav. What did Rav mean when Rav said that the child is a mamzer? Lav mutter b'mamzeres. Didn't mean that's mutter to marry mamzeres. Ella, what Rav meant is da'aser b'bas Yisrael. Ushmul amar Vlad Shtuki, meaning da'aser b'bas Yisrael, meaning this machlaikas Rav and Shmuel is not really whether it's mamzeres, rather if it's mutter to bas Yisrael or not. Ihachi asks the Gemara if that's what you're explaining, Rav and Shmuel. Hainu dirav. If what you're saying is accurate, then Shmuel is saying the same thing as Rav. If Shmuel is just saying the Asr b'Bas Yisrael, and Rav is saying Lav Mutter b'Mamzeres, but Asr b'Bas Yisrael, Rav and Shmuel are saying the same thing. Says the Gemara, Elamai Shtuki, Shemishtakin Aisai Midin Kahuna. So you know what? How we can explain this? You know what Shmuel meant when he said he's a Shtuki? He just meant that we're Mishtakin. We silence the child from the halachas of Kuna in such a scenario. Says the Gemara, Pshita, what are you teaching me? That's Pashet. Hashtami din Yisrael mishtakin alei. If we don't allow this child to get involved with the Yisrael, midin kuna mi bai. What's the chiddush? Of course the kid can't get involved with kuna. He can't even get involved in the Yisrael. Says the Gemara, you're right. Elamai shtuki. Shemishtakin aisai minichsei aviv. that we don't let him get involved in the Yerusha of his father's estate. Says the Gemara, Pshita miya didn't avu amanu. We don't know who his father is. Shkoyach, he can't get the Yerusha. We have no clue who the kid's father is. Says the Gemara, Lo tzricha de tafas. That what the child grabbed from his father's estate, we don't allow him to keep it. By saying a second it's my shtuki. Baduki, that what? Shaboikin is imay v'ameres lekashin avalti. We check the mother and she says I was together with a kosher. Nemenes kiman. Krav Gamliel. Like Rav Gamliel. Ask the Gemara 1 second. Amar Shmuel Chadazimna. Shmuel already said this one time to Tanan. Like we learned in a Mishnah, if she is pregnant, we just had this Vamrullah and we ask her, she says it's from so and so. Is a kain Rav Gamliel, Rav Lezer, Aimer Nemenes. She is believed, Rav Yeshua, Aimer Einay Nemenes. Vamar Rav Yudah, Amar Shmuel, who's the din who we're trying to figure out halacha, Kihu, Rav Gamliel, that she is Nemenes. So why we have to say the exact same case again, teaching me that she has a credibility? Explains the Gemara on the first wide line, Ayin Hey Amid Aleph, 5 lines from the bottom, Srich. Dime Asam Avimina Asam Rav Ksheir Metzla. Aval Hacha, the Rav Sul Metzla Imalai, Sricha. That's why we have to say the same case again. Continues the Gemara. Let's go a little bit deeper into Rav Elazar of the Mishnah. Tanya. Says the Gemara in the second line, Chein Rav Elazar, Omer, Kuti lo yisa kutis. My time, Rav Yosef, you know why? Also, kiger. We made him like a ger, la'achar asara dairis. It's like a ger after 10 generations, which is what? Titania. Ger at asara dairis mutabim zeres, become elach asram zeres. And some say, Achi ishtaku, shame akum imenu, until the name of the Vodazara is forgotten from him. Amrle Abaya midami. Ha, some ger yashan mamzeres chadasha. Over there is a different case as Abaya. Over there, the ger is yashan, we don't know who he is. But the mamzeres, that everyone knows about. Amri, people are going to say, Bar Yisraelu, people are going to say that it's a Bas Yisrael marrying a Mamzeres. Whereas Halcha, in our case, they're both the same. Explains the Gemara, Ki Asr Avdimi Amar Avalazah Savala Ki Rabbi Yishmael. We're going like Rabbi Yishmael. For Rabbi Yishmael, as we turn over to Ayin Hey Amid Beis, says the Gemara, who does Rabbi Yishmael hold like? Rabbi Yishmael Savar Ki Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Yishmael holds like Rabbi Akiva. So who's Rabbi Yishmael? Who is Rabbi Akiva? Explains the Gemara. Explains the Gemara. I'm just not sure what happened to our logo. Seems to have disappeared. Okay, let's move on. Explains the Gemara. So Rabbi Yishmael Savar like Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Lazar Savar Rabbi Yishmael. What does it mean of love stuff like Rabbi Yishmael? The Amar who says Kutim Geirei Arayisim, a very famous in classical machlekes. What is the status of a kuti? Says Rabbi Yishmael, they have the din of Geirei Arayisim. They were not kosher Geirim. They only became Geirim because they're afraid of the lions. Rabbi Yishmael stuff like Rabbi Kiva Damar Akum Ve'eved Abba Abbas Yisrael. Havalan Mamzer. The ensuing child is going to be a Mamzer. Says the Gemara, no way. How can you tell me that Yishmael is like Rabbi Kiva? Rabbi Yechla says the name of Rabbi Yishmael. Manayim la'akav eved jabal kayenes v'alaviyah v'abas Yisrael shebas lua shenemar bas kayin kisi alman agusha v'zera ein la. From there we learn out misheish alman azugerishin. Only in such a scenario, Yatsa Akum Ve'eved She'ein Loy Almanas V'gerishin. So how can you say that our case is the case of Akum Ve'eved? Explains the Gemara. If you're going to Rabbi Akiva, says the Gemara, if the child is going to be a mamzer, then the act of bia should make her puzzle to a kohen. Says the Gemara, you're right. Ella Rav Elazar Savlik Rabbi Yishmael Damar Kutim Geri Arayis Savlik Rabbi Kiva Damar Akom Ve'eved Abba Bas Yisrael Havalan Mamzer. Says that doesn't work either. Umisavla Rav Elazar Kravi Kiva V'Amar Rav Elazar Af Al Pi Shenechlu Beishami Beis Hillel B'Tzarais Moedim She'ein Mamzer. Even though Beishami Beis Hillel disagreed, but Lamaisa, they're both on the same team, that the child is not a mamzer. Ella, only in what scenario? Mimisha Isura Isser Erva. The only time we have a mamzer is when the Isser is one of an Erva and Va'inesh Kares. Says the Gemara, you're right. With this we conclude, Ella ki asa Ravin, Amar Rav Cheber Rabba, Amar Rav Yechanan, V'amri Lam Rav Abba bar Zavza, Amar Rav Chanina, V'amri Lam Rav Yaakov bar Idi, Amar Rav Yehuda ben Levi, Shalish machlaikes badavar. There's three different machlaikeses in this story of the Kutis and the Kohanim that got married. Ravi Shmuel Savar Kutim Ger Raisim. The Kohanim Shenitu B'hem, the Kohanim that got involved with them, Kohanim Psulim Hayu. Shenemar V'yasalem Iksaisam Kohane B'hamais. That's opinion number one. V'amar Rav Elazar Rav Achana. What do we learn from this pasuk? Amar Rav Yechon. Min akutzim sva'am, from the kutzim sheba'am, of the nations. Mishamachi, and that's the reason why paslino they become pasul. That's Rabbi Shmuel. Rav Kiva Savar, no. Kutim geriyem same. They're really kosher gerim. But kohanim shenitu b'hem, kohanim gesherim ayu. The kohanim they got involved with them really are kosher. Shenem Rav Yaslam mikseisem kane b'amos. And finally, V'amar Rav Achanim Rav Yechanan min habachirin sheba'am. And finally, Rav Nachman, and this is explaining the shita. It's explaining the shita of Rav Chia. The Amar Rav Achanim Rav Yechanan min habachirim sheba'am. Ve'elminei ma'asrum. So why they aser if they're giriyam the same? Neishayim yavmim as harusais. Because they were doing yibam with women who already had irisin to someone else. Upaitrin as hanisuais. And that's the issue that was happening, is they were doing yibum in such a scenario. We'll stop over here, and the next year, we're going to go a bit deeper where the yibum of these kusim came from.